The greatest advance in sound since high fidelity was invented. Command Records, for discriminating people who desire the finest in sound. Always demand command. Enoch Light was quite a showman, and his copywriters were prone to hype. But there's something very special about the Command label. And I happen to have a lot of Command releases. I looked around the internet to see if there was any major videos on this subject, and there is not. I've done a couple as far as tape for Command Records, but no one's really done anything on the label like I would. And what that means is I'm going to go into the history, I'm going to go into the performers, we're going to do a label comparison. There are three labels at least for Command Records. We're going to talk about the pressing plants. We're going to talk about the jacket design, the artists, and I will go through probably 25 at a time. This will be several different videos. I'll probably go through 25 in this batch and just give you a brief synopsis of what to expect. And at the end, I will name the must-haves for Command Records. I'm also going to put together a box, surprise box. If you've been watching my thrift store videos, you know that I've been getting a lot of Command Records recently to add to what I already had hidden away in my vault. I don't have access to them all at the moment, so I'm going to use the stack that came in recently. Many of these are second or third copies, so I have to move records out of my space. I just don't have the room. And I think it would be fun for anyone that's a fan of these videos on Command to get a package of their own, chock full of Command Records. So I'm going to put all the extra copies into an assortment, a box of maybe 20 or 25, and you can buy them if you like. Just let me know at the end of the video. It will be a surprise, but I promise there will be gems in each of them. They will be like $1 each or something like that. So for $25 plus shipping, you can get a big surprise, and you'll have a record that's definitely worth 25 bucks in there anyway. So let's talk about Command. Command was a label that came out in 1959. It was started by a gentleman named Enoch Light. Enoch Light was an arranger, conductor, musician as well, I think. He was versed in record production already. He had a label before this called Grand Award. Grand Award sort of set the template for what was to come in Command, but it was a few years earlier, in the late 50s, right before Command first made their splash in 1959. The Grand Award records look old-fashioned. Many of the covers have a template of like a wooden frame with a little image in the center, and you know, they look old-fashioned. They're single pocket jackets. You see them in the thrift stores. You probably passed them by before. You know, in terms of the style of music and arranging, it's very similar to Command. And you could probably mistake some of the later Grand Award records for Command Records if you didn't see the covers. In 1959, Enoch Light decided to do something to capitalize on the then new stereo craze. So people were starting to get their hi-fi setups. They were starting to get their stereo setups. My parents, I think, in '62 got their first console, stereo console. And of course, everyone that got a stereo console in those days got a Command record with it. I have many of the Command samplers that are from Admiral or Magnavox or other companies. Enoch Light was quite a marketer. he's kind of like the P.T. Barnum of the record world, and he did a magnificent job getting the name and the idea of Command out there into the public consciousness. Now, this was really a label that was aimed towards audiophiles and hi-fi buffs. So even though most of these came out in mono and stereo, we're really going to be talking about the stereo because to me, there's no real reason to go for mono in this case. It's all about the stereo. And when you hear a Command record, you know what I'm talking about. These records exploit stereo in extreme ways. You'll often hear things repeated, like a bongo over here, and then the same pattern over here, and back and forth. These early records gave people what they wanted to hear. They wanted to hear each of their new stereo speakers speaking. So in that way, it was kind of cool that you heard different things in different channels. After the track started and the channel identification was sort of set, then things got a little bit better, but it was very noticeable how things were placed in the stereo soundstage, and it was a novelty at the time. Their first record sold by the boatload. I don't have it here in this batch, but this is part of the series called Persuasive Percussion. That first record was by Terry Snyder and the All-Stars, and we'll get to it. It is a classic, and it definitely is one of the recommended ones. The Persuasive Percussion and its sister series, Provocative Percussion, were bestsellers. They just went from volume 1 to volume 2. This is volume 3. I have a volume 3 for Provocative Percussion in this stack as well. Volume 4, and then I think they started going to years. So then you'll see Provocative Percussion 1966 or something like that. So how do you recognize a Command record? Well, one of the things that you will recognize right away is the graphic designs. We're going to talk about the graphic designs and why they were so important and influential on all the record labels. If you are a thrifter, you know everybody copied this idea. Big, bold graphic designs and percussion became a thing. Fortunately, Command was much more than that, and really they stayed on top of this trend and were the top quality label doing this type of stuff. So even though there were some great imitators, there are none that are quite as good as Command. To achieve this audiophile level of sound, Command took extra steps to ensure that they had the best recordings possible. To that end, the recording engineer for many of these sessions was Robert Fine. Robert Fine, you may know if you're in the classical world, was the engineer behind Mercury Living Presence, some of the best classical recordings ever done. He had a studio in New York called Fine Studio, and they engaged Robert Fine to do these recordings, first on tape, later on 35 millimeter film. They also credit the mastering engineer on all these releases, which was unusual for the time period. I mean, really, when you look at a Command release, you're like, wow, these are like the current high-end audiophile jackets of the day, because you see the equipment used to record it. You see the mastering engineer noted. You see the recording engineer. These are types of things that weren't seen very often on records before this. So this was another innovation. Inside every Command release, you'll see that. Somewhere down here, the recording engineer, the mastering engineer. They chose George Piros to master all these records. You'll see his initials in the dead wax, P17. And collectors of rock records from the 70s probably know George Piros' name. Well, this is what he was doing a few years earlier, honing his craft with an audiophile series called Command Records. There's also several labels used throughout the history of Command Records. The first is a gray and white label, and to me, those are most desirable, but there's nothing wrong with the second label. It is cream with a gold Command logo and black script. Those two are wonderful, but I feel a certain pull towards the gray and white label when it's available. There's also many pressing plants involved, but just like with RCA Living Stereo, the premier pressing plant that Command used was RCA Indianapolis. I've talked about Indianapolis pressings before in the classical videos that I do, and the same applies here. If you can get an Indianapolis pressing on a gray and white label, those are the best, in my opinion. Everything else is good too, but there is a slight increase in warmth and depth that just comes across better on the Indianapolis pressings. It's a mystery why. I really don't know why. Maybe it's psychological because the record feels and looks so good. It's nice and heavy, rounded edges, and pressed extremely well. Because these records were so popular, they were pressed everywhere. So, you know, for $1 to acquire one of these, usually it's not much more than that. You can afford to take chances and do like I did, have several copies and pick your favorite among them. All right, so we talked about labels, we talked about pressing plants, we talked about the aim of these records, and I want to talk about the jackets. You see this design here? This was one of the few that were done by noted color theorist and graphic designer Joseph Albers. If you are at all in the design world, you'll know his name. Joseph Albers graced the first covers with the simplest, minimalist graphic designs. The first two were in black and white, maybe three, and this one was one of the few that were in color. These set the look of the series. So when you see a Command record in a rack, it jumps out at you because of this bold graphic design that was carried over by other artists after Joseph Albers. It is a distinctive feature of Command Records, and everyone copied it. You'll see a lot of copycat labels with, you know, squares and circles and different colors and arrangements, trying to pretend that they're a Command record. As a matter of fact, I've showed a few on the channel before. So one of the other things about these Command records is they still look good when you find them today. Why is that? Because they're completely laminated. At least the early ones were laminated on the back as well. This protects the artwork and they don't get dirty or scuffed up. So not only that, they used high quality gatefolds, which was really unusual for a pop record at that time. You didn't see many gatefolds in 1959. And this set the series apart as a luxury product. Just like we love the product packaging of today with, you know, maybe the One Steps or the Tone Poets, nice glossy jackets. This is kind of like the Tone Poet of the generation in terms of packaging. There is a stable of artists on Command, and you'll see them float from each other's albums. You know, Enoch Light was the main producer of his own recordings under the name Enoch Light and the Light Brigade, or the Command All-Stars, or Enoch Light and his orchestra. But the people that are involved in each of these records also made some solo records, and they're very interesting as well. People like Dick Hyman, he's a pianist and organist, or Tony Mottola, who is a guitarist. Doc Severinsen plays trumpet. You probably recognize his name. There are others that are studio musicians that you may not recognize, but they're all over these records. Bob Haggart, Phil Bodner, Dominic Cortez, Stanley Webb. I'm trying to think of some that I see all the time. Tony Mottola, I mentioned. Yeah, so they float from each session. They were the cream of crop of New York studio musicians. And Enoch Light had a good relationship with these people going back to the Grand Award days. So let's see, what else can I tell you? I talked about the artwork, the labels, the pressing plant, the artist behind the records, the producer, the mastering engineer. Okay, I think I covered all the basics. There's always more, but let's start going through the records. If you're going to get your first Command record, I would suggest getting one of the provocative percussion or persuasive percussion series records. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, as I said, in each series. They just have everything that you want in a Command record. They have the exaggerated stereo, the extremely clear recording of each instrument, a wide range of instruments, percussion, which is always fun. So you hear lots of drums, bongos, cymbals, castanets, everything to give you the illusion and impression of this vast soundstage. You also get great woodwinds, brass, and drums. And it's just a fun, nostalgic kind of trip that also shows off your stereo. The very best pressings are really well balanced, and I think they are the gray and white label Indianapolis pressings. This one is a later one, and it could just be a bias, I don't know, but these are the later labels. They have a gold Command on a cream color background. They sound a little bit thinner to me. But it doesn't matter though. Either one is fine. The thing is, with Command's arrangements and their recording style, things can get, especially if they're brassy, can get a little bit too much. Enoch Light went for like pow, pow, pow with the brass, and sometimes it's just a bit too much. The very best records on Command avoid this and use it sparingly, but also bring out everything else in the record. So, this one I think is an excellent choice, an early choice. You get the great Joseph Albers cover, and you get exactly what Command Records is all about. These are in no particular order. And one of the delights of this video is going to be to see all this artwork in high resolution. This one here is new to me. I just got it in one of those thrift store boxes. It's Enoch Light and his orchestra, my musical coloring book. And you can see it has, the bold graphics, of course. In this case, who did the cover? Charles Murphy. He was the art director, and he took over some of the designs after a while. I think it's a very clever design, and all the tracks have a color in them. So, like Yellow Bird, Golden Earrings, The Blue Room, that old Black Magic, Green Eyes, Mood Indigo, and so forth. Another thing about these Command releases is you'll see the same songs over and over, but they're not the same recordings. They're just different arrangements. They really leaned heavily on popular songs of the era, of course, and the eras prior to that. So you'll see a track like Yellow Bird or that old Black Magic repeated over and over across dozens of these albums. This one is recorded by Robert Fine, mastered by George Piros, and it was arranged by Lou Davis. Now, Lou Davis is an important name in Command. Lou Davis really gave these records their distinctive arrangements and inventive arrangements designed to exploit the stereo. When he worked with Enoch Light on his own Enoch Light records, you could feel the heavy influence of Enoch Light. But when he did something on his own, it can be very special. And we'll talk about one of the very special ones later. But this is easily recommended. It is a little brassy, but it is fun. And it's recorded on 35 millimeter film, which was, a big advance in sound quality. And they'll talk about it in the back. He will go into that. So My musical coloring book is a good one. If you ever see it, get it. It's pretty rare. Okay, so this is another 35 millimeter film recording. They depended on Broadway and movie soundtrack music, and every year would come out with like something like this: 1963, the most popular tunes done by Enoch Light and his orchestra. So you get Lawrence of Arabia, Mutiny on the Bounty, stuff like that. Days of Wine and Roses, How the West Was Won. I could go on singing. This one is arranged by Lou Davis, recorded by Robert Fine, and mastered by George Piros. And it's on 35 millimeter film. This is easy to recommend. It was really fun. I was surprised. I actually listened to it last night and enjoyed the whole thing. Usually these kind of things get to be a little too much after a while, like the same kind of pattern, but this one was quite interesting and beautiful in its own way. Here's one of the bold graphic designs that came later in the Provocative Percussion series. This wasn't done by Joseph Albers, but it looks like it, doesn't it? It's called Provocative Percussion Volume 3. And this one is Enoch Light and the Light Brigade. And some of the people here, I'm going to read some of the artists on this one because it's important. Bob Rosengarten is someone you'll see on a lot of these records, he's a percussionist. Phil Krause, also on drums. Doc Severinsen on trumpet. Mel Davis, Bernie Glow, Stanley Webb, Phil Bodner, Tony Mottola, Irby Green, Bob Haggard, Willie Rodriguez, and others that you probably wouldn't recognize today, but a great ensemble of players. This is one of those essentials, I would say. It is produced, it is recorded by Robert Fine, mastered by George Piros. And this is the kind of sound that attracts people to this series. Really eye-popping stereo, just things that'll really show off your stereo, show off the separation, show off the clarity, the depth, the tonality of instruments, the accuracy and the precision. It's just unbelievable, really. This gets a high recommendation from me. I love it. And of course, get it for the cover. It's wonderful. A lot of these, I will say, get it for the cover because I'm into the covers. Let's go for some that are a little marginal in terms of, recommending. There's nothing wrong with this record. This is the first time I've had this one. It's the music of Leonard Bernstein, the Ray Charles Singers, Enoch Light and his orchestra, and two soloists, Alfred Drake and Roberta Peters from stage and I think the opera stage as well. Great music, well recorded. Let's see, who did this one? Robert Fine, George Piros. It's kind of like seeing, Moore and Layton on an RCA Living Stereo. It's going to be decent, at least. The artwork here was done by Charles Murphy, repeating that kind of theme, but giving us a little bit more of a sophisticated cover, I think. This was recorded on 35 millimeter film, features West Side Story, Candide, On the Town, and Wonderful Town. Great tunes on this. So while it's kind of Broadway oriented and it's not something that you would normally be drawn to for Command Records, if you ever see it, it's one of those ones that you must get as a completist. And it's really pretty. This is a beautiful copy. Wow. I was so lucky to get that. Here's another one that's a little unusual. Enoch Light and his orchestra at Carnegie Hall doing Irving Berlin. And this is a cutout. You'll see cutout marks or punch holes on some of these. 35 millimeter film recording. This was arranged by Lou Davis, recorded by Robert Fine, mastered by George Piros. It's not bad. It's great tunes like Cheek to Cheek. Alexander's Ragtime Band. What else? There's No Business Like Show Business. A Pretty Girl's Like a Melody. Irving Berlin had great tunes, and they're interpreted here in Enoch Light's brassy, you know, big kind of style. As far as it being recorded in Carnegie Hall, I don't really hear the hall like you would in a fine classical recording, but it's okay. This one is kind of a collection of Doc Severinsen's best work up to that point. I do love the cover on this one. The graphic design is really nice. The cover looks great. And let's see. Robert Fine, George Piros. Doesn't say who. Well, I guess the arrangers are all over the place. I'm personally not a fan of the Doc Severinsen records. They are just too sharp and brassy for me. His trumpet sound on these is exaggerated, and it gets to be a little too much for my taste. But there's nothing wrong with his performances. Here's one that is relatively new to me, Lee Evans and his orchestra in concert. The concert touch, exciting popular piano arrangements. They go on and on about him on this. The most exciting new musical personality to appear since high fidelity recording began. Well, I think that's a little overstated, but I do love the cover on this one. Musically, this wasn't that interesting to me, honestly, but it's not bad. This one is, let's see, piano arrangements by Lee Evans, orchestrations by Lou Davis, Robert Fine. Again, there were some vocal groups on Command. This is one of them, the Robert DeCormier Singers, the folk album. I had really high hopes for this. I thought, maybe it would be kind of authentic, like maybe the Belafonte folk singers, but it wasn't like that. It's just kind of a fun, poppy record of tunes that are sort of related to folk. So, I don't think vocal albums are really where Command had their strengths. They're not bad, and if your parents were in this ensemble, I'm not putting it down, but it's fun for sure. It's nostalgic. They do things like Pick a Bale of Cotton, Sippin' Cider, Cotton Fields, 500 Miles, Lonesome Traveler, Blowin' in the Wind, Wayfarin' Stranger, Goodnight Irene. So, definitely folk tunes, but not one to get right off the bat. Here's one from Dick Hyman. Dick Hyman and his trio. This is not bad. This is kind of a jazzy type of album, like a trio. He's on piano, and he is very talented. Here we have Love for Sale, Lost in the Stars, Make Someone Happy, 42nd Street, The Bad and the Beautiful, Lazy Afternoon, stuff like that. This one is recommended. I think all the Dick Hyman ones are really good. Definitely the credits are good here. Again, Lou Davis, Robert Fine, and George Piros. Here's one that I don't really recommend. There's a lot of these Ray Charles Singers ones. The cover's definitely groovy. I like the cover, but in general, this vocal group stuff from the Ray Charles Singers is not what I come to Command for. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. It's recorded well. Of course, I think it's, the usual suspects. But after a while, these get to be kind of the same. If you see it, though, and it's $1, get it. This one I really liked a lot. Roman accordion, Charles Magnante and his orchestra. Great cover. One of the best. I love that cover. So this is tunes that are associated, I guess, with Rome. Some of these concepts really struggle to pull things together that fall under the same theme, but I think they did a good job with this one. It looks really beautiful. It is Robert Fine recording this, and I don't think it's arranged by Lou Davis, though. Yeah, great for the sound of the accordion, and full arrangements of stuff around that. So here's one that was Enoch Light doing film scores. Stereo 35 millimeter film. This was a big advance in sound reproduction, of course. Got West Side Story, Never on Sunday, La Dolce Vita, Exodus, Breakfast at Tiffany's, King of Kings, the usual stuff. This is okay. I don't really go for the Enoch Light ones as much as I do like some of the solo artists. This is a famous one. It's called Let's Dance the Bossa Nova. There was an earlier version of this, so they are big band arrangements of bossa nova tunes. It's very danceable. There is a card in these somewhere to show you how to dance the bossa nova. If you have that in your record, that's pretty cool. There's also a sticker on all the covers telling you that there is that in there. This one's fun. There's nothing wrong with this one. I think the first one might be a little better, but this is pretty good. Let's Dance the Bossa Nova. This is one of the most frustrating ones. It is Tony Mottola, the guitarist, Love Songs, Mexico, South America. And this seems like a tug of war between Enoch Light and Tony Mottola. They're like fighting for what they want to hear and how they want to play these things. So you'll get a beautiful thing like the theme from Black Orpheus, just gorgeous guitar work, subtle arrangement. And then it seems like Enoch Light comes in with something like Guadalajara or Mexican Hat Dance, which is very busy and lively and a lot of percussion and brassy, and it just takes away from the beauty of Tony's quiet cuts, which alternate pretty much one after another. So you get theme from Black Orpheus, then Guadalajara, then you get Sabor a Mi, Be True to Me, and then you'll have Mexican Hat Dance, and then you'll have Beautiful Girl from Ipanema, and then you have Mexican Melody. So I wish there was a whole album of Tony's softer material, and we'll probably get to one at some point, but that's not it. It's like half recommended. This one, like I said, I'm not into Doc Severinsen. They kind of moved away from the graphic design for this cover. And although, Doc is a good looking guy, this looks like a nice photo. It's just not my cup of tea. It doesn't really have what I'm looking for in the Command record. This one is promising. Tony Mottola, Sentimental Guitar. Not bad. Not my top Tony Mottola album, but it's pretty good. I think it's good. If you ever see that, grab it. I have a couple of copies. One of those will go into the thrift store package. This is another artist you'll see on Command, Warnheim, and his Brass Impact. It's brassy, it's got female vocals, and it's fun. This is a really fun record. I enjoyed all of these. There's like 3 of them. Brass Impact, Explosive Brass Impact, and Brass Impact going someplace. So yeah, there's a lot of those. Here's a Tony Mottola solo album that I don't recommend. I didn't like this at all. I thought it looked really promising. I love the cover, but string band strum along. It's guitars, mandolin, ukulele, and banjo, and it's not that great. Okay, I'm going to get to a couple more, and then we'll tie this up with my highest recommendations. All right, so Big, Bold, and Brassy is percussion and brass. It's an early one. It's one of the nicest graphic designs after Joseph Albers. This was done by an artist called Neil Fujita, S. Neil Fujita. Really pretty, worth getting for the cover. All these are worth getting for the cover, really, but this is a great record. It is very brassy, like I said, pow, 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 like really something, but it's fun, and it has everything, the type of sound that you're going to be attracted to Command records for. So in this one, I say it's recommended. This one is definitely recommended. It's an early one called Bongos, Bongos, Bongos. This is highlighting bongos, and percussion. And that's something that Command did really well. So this is a little more focused. The artwork is by Charles Murphy, a study in typography. And we got Willie Rodriguez on here, Don Lamond, Bob Haggart, Stanley Webb, Artie Maratti, and Tony Mottola. And this is really, really a great album. I love this one. Fun, fun, fun. Wow, this is such a stack. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. Vibrations. Vibrations came a little bit later. This is 833, and it tries to recapture the idea of persuasive and provocative percussion, and it does so very well. This is a worthy follow-up to those albums. It's by Enoch Light and the Light Brigade. And of course, all the usual suspects are here on this record. This is a fun one. I would recommend that. Here's one of those Ray Charles ones. It's not bad. It's Ray Charles Singer's Young Lovers on Broadway. You know, nice to hear these songs, but not something that I'm really drawn to Command to listen to. So now I'm going to save my best for last. You might want to get your pen and paper out because I'm going to rave about this one. Strange Interlude. Strange Interlude. Lou Davis and his orchestra. From the graphic design to the recording to the arranging to the playing, everything about this record is high, high quality. This is one of the best Command records. I love this. Lou Davis seemed to have been given carte blanche to do things how he wanted, without a lot of heavy influence from Enoch Light. And the result is wonderful. You hear bass, reeds, drums. You hear some unusual instruments as well. The ondulin, the theremin, and the cymbalum on this record. So it has a little bit of an exotic sound to it. You also hear French horns, trombones, and it's beautifully arranged, really subtle, lovely arrangements that you just don't want to take off. And you can't say that about every Command record. Usually one side of a Command record is pretty much enough for most people, but this is one that bears up to repeated playing. And I have a couple of copies, and I'm glad I do. But if you ever see this, grab it. This is one, like the Provocative Percussion and Persuasive Percussion series, this is one that's worth paying a little bit more for, I would say, in my opinion. So, Strange Interlude, Lou Davis, recorded by Robert Fine and mastered by George Piros, is a wonderful record. Okay, where are we at? Almost 40 minutes. I'm going to stop there because it gets to be a little too much, doesn't it? There's more. I got more, a lot more. So we'll do a part 2, and I'll make comments on the rest of the records that I have here. And honestly, the second batch is probably going to be even better than this one because that has all the ones that I collected early on, and I really drilled down and picked the very best. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this overview of the Command label and a look at some of the artwork and covers. Until next time, I'm Scott for The Pressing Matters. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.